Thank you for joining us. This is Health Your Own Way podcast, and I am your host, Mo Atkins. Welcome to another episode. Today, we're going to discover how scapegoating can affect your mental health. And my guest speaker is Gina. She's an educator, an author that holds 3 master's degrees. Whew, okay. Education, Science and Education Administration, and Divinity, but feels like she's a student of internal learning. I don't know how you feel like a student. I feel like you could teach me more in the past few seconds. And first of all, congratulations on the 3 master degree. I know a lot of people have a hard time even getting one. So kudos to you and welcome. Anything you want to add before we start today?
Just thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. I really wanted to have this conversation because I think a lot of people don't understand what scapegoating is. A lot of people don't even get the idea. So, before we delve into how it affects your mental state, what can you define what scapegoating is?
So scapegoating is multiplex. There's so many layers that it really is complicated. But at the brass tacks level, at an individual level, it's the process in which the mechanisms of projection or displacement are used in focusing feelings of aggression, of hostility, frustration upon another individual or group, right? So the amount of blame is really unwarranted. Scapegoating is a hostile tactic often employed to characterize an entire group of individuals according to the unethical and immoral conduct of a small number of individuals. Now, let me give you examples of that. Individually, typically we find it in narcissist parents, like a mother, typically, who has internal rage that she cannot negotiate. And so rather than accept the failures for her as a parent in the work that she did not do with her kids, she'd rather blame that on placing that with a target, an individual who is typically a low self-esteem child or someone who is so strong in their integrity and ethos that they make the parent look bad, right? So the parent then says, well, I'm not going to let the family, look badly in the community. So it's easier for me to say, you know what, I'm going to pathologize, and that's a psychological term. I'm going to make this person look like they have innate abilities of being disrespectful or being slow and not able to keep up, which brings stress upon the parent. Anything that would make that person normalized by placing all of the blame onto the child. Structurally, institutionally, if you're talking about discrimination, and I've said this in other podcasts, a great example of that would be Donald Trump, that he blamed groups of people like Africans, saying that they lived in, I don't want to use the word, but S-hole countries. You can insert what S means, like Haiti and all of that. He said concerning Mexicans, all you're bringing in are criminals. You're bringing in rapists and drug dealers. And instead of saying that, well, we as a country, America, could do better in helping to bridge the gap of poverty within these countries so that they can feel good about living in their countries and not feeling that they have to leave, which everybody's invited to America. So I don't want to make it look like I'm not about immigration, but feeling that they're having to come here undocumented because of the ways in which they're treated in their country. He didn't deal with that. He dealt with it in saying they have innate aggressions, which is why they broke laws to get here. And he went to these white communities, specifically poor white communities, and said, if they come here, Mexicans will take your jobs. He went to Black communities and said, if Mexicans come, they're going to take your job and you're already oppressed, and I alone can save you. So that's what happens institutionally. In the workplace, which I, unfortunately was a scapegoat, if the numbers aren't doing well, the books aren't doing well in terms of what needs to come in terms of, let's say, corporate structures where everything is about how much workload is going to bring money in, rather than the boss saying, well, maybe I didn't train my employees well, or maybe I should myself go back into training so that I could better understand my job so that my employees would do better. In my case as a teacher, where we relied upon average daily attendance as being the money behind when kids came to school, the state would pay for them to come. And if they didn't come, it was because, for whatever reason, let's say it was family structures or it was something within their communities, it was easy for the boss to say, well, it's because my teacher isn't a good teacher that The students didn't want to come to school. They didn't feel comfortable with the learning, the pedagogy in which this teacher was teaching, rather than saying, I didn't create a good environment. I didn't allow differentiated instruction where my teachers would have autonomy and teach in ways that they could understand. I had them teach the way that I run the school, right? And so all of those things happen within, individual, institutional, and structural, comportments of society. So scapegoating is about, ultimately at the end of the day, blaming other people for one's failures. Now I know I gave you a lot, but that's
No, you
just
didn't.
how
You
it
gave me
was.
you gave me perfect. You gave me a lot. It was perfect.
Okay,
It
so
was
those are
perfect.
the things that has really made it difficult. And how it becomes a mental health issue is that it creates almost like intergenerational trauma, where if one person has not jumped into therapy to get the support that they need, understanding that it's not that person's fault, but it is the failure and the blame of the other person that projected that onto them, that they should have been the one held to task, then they themselves can turn from a scapegoat and become a scapegoater, just like hurt people hurt and wounded people wound.
No, I'm listening. Sorry, I'm taking a lot, and while you're talking, I'm reviewing my life, I'm reviewing my interactions with people, and I'm also understanding what you said, because even when the first example you talked about, the mother, and how she couldn't deal internally, so she had to externalize it elsewhere, was really profound, because I feel like, not I feel like that a lot of people have very toxic relationships based on that kind of issue.
Right.
um Institutional wise, it makes sense in respects to the fact that, even example, when you mentioned the corporate environment, like, at one point, instead of just blaming somebody, what I think the first step is really understanding what you could have done differently, and then determine. Yeah, so I think, even, let's say, just on a personal relationship, even in a romantic relationship, like, a lot of times when you're talking to your significant other, instead of scapegoating the situation, maybe not the right word, like, just figure out, okay, what did you do to contribute to the situation? What could have you done differently? And, at the same time, if you felt like you haven't done something different, or you were able to communicate, then I can understand if it's the other person's responsibility to acknowledge that they could have made a change. But just tell me, Gina, am I understanding correctly so far?
You're brilliant. I'm ready for you to take the test.
That's why I said
You're
you didn't say enough.
sentencing.
It was perfect. Like, I
Wow.
felt
Thank
odd. I
you.
was just sitting there going, okay, okay, okay. I'm just like saying, okay, all right. She's speaking words. I'm just thinking a lot of people need to hear this conversation, because, wow. Okay, let me stop. I say this because I think, like you said, a lot, and I think there's so much you can pack on each part of what you said. That's
Mm,
what that's what got me, because even not even only the mother, but just the family dynamic. Like, I
mhm.
find a lot of people are struggling. They don't understand how to take
Absolutely.
personal responsibility, right?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
when you said scope gator, great word, great word. It's more like, I don't think a lot of people, when you think of abusers, some people, that's how they were taught, and that's what their expectations are. So I've never really
Right.
heard the scope gator, but it's perfect, because you are taught that that's how you should treat somebody and how you should respond to certain things, right?
Right. Right, absolutely. And, a lot of times, especially in Western cultures, we are told that we can't make mistakes, that if we do, then we're lazy, or we haven't taken the time to learn things. When really sometimes we just have difficulties. I mean, everybody has mistakes. Even the Bible says, for we all sin and fall short of the glory. But somehow this supersizing, like when you go to McDonald's, everything's supersized, right? Everything's perfected. Everything has to be over the top
Bigger.
and brilliant. Exactly. And when we miss that mark, then it's automatically something's wrong with us. And for people that do not have a high self efficacy of who they are, then they tend to shift that blame onto someone else. And so a lot of the work has to be internal. It has to be about intrinsically excavating self, laying everything out there and saying, this is what's going on in my life. This is how I need to handle it. And that I can no longer blame other people for the work that I need to do in myself. And then to also understand that we will fail, because I think the prerequisite to fail or to success is failing. And I always say,
100%.
yeah, fail forward, not fail down, fail forward, right? I failed so many times in my life, including flunking out of college. And someone like me that ended up with the amount of education by the grace of God is because I failed forward, but I got up. I didn't blame the school and said, oh, well, they just didn't have good teachers. No, I was lazy. I partied like a rock star. Let's keep it real. I went to a Black college. That's what we do. We get our education, but we party, right? So,
I don't.
I mean, I think it's just about reclaiming your agency by internally investigating and seeing the things that are not healthy and reconciling it so that you don't damage other people. That's what this book is about.
I agree with you. We're gonna go to your book, but I want to make a comment first. When you
Sure.
mentioned that you have to take personal like acknowledgement that you do have inner issues or inner trauma that you have to rectify, and you have to understand you can't basically um project your own insecurities out there, or for some people are not self-aware. Okay, some people are not self-aware. That's what I'm going. Some people are not self-aware.
Absolutely.
I'm talking to those people. How do you get them self-aware?
You know what? It's so hard because one of the things that I tell people when you're dealing with, and I hate to keep saying a narcissist, but typically it's hard to extrapolate narcissism from someone that's a scapegoater. They're usually twins, right? It's usually a
Okay.
part of who they are. And scapegoating is not a mental health disorder, it's a character disorder.
Mhm.
And why
Mhm.
that's sad is with mental health disorders, there's treatment, there's cognitive behavioral therapy, there's one-to-one treatments, there's all, individual therapy, corporate therapy, there's all kind of protocols out there to help the individual. When you're talking about a character dysfunction, that's just who someone is based on the immorality or the morality of their parent. Some people take on good characters, some people take on bad characters. It's how the reflected patriarchal function is from the family structure will determine how that person ends up. And that's hard to unpack. So to try to make someone
Fair enough. I hear you.
recharacterize who they are is a lot harder. It's just like if someone's a thief and they're going to steal, it's hard to say, don't steal, if that's a part of who they are. And being a thief is not a mental health issue, that's an evil issue, that's a sin issue. So then you're talking about mental health versus sin. And that's why I call them layered complexity. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's really hard to make someone self-aware unless there's something that triggers them to understand. And maybe that means losing people in their lives because they understand that maybe there's something about them that people don't want to be around them. You know what I mean? It could be losing a loved one through marriage. All kinds of things. It may take that person to become isolated and saying, "Why does anyone want to be around me? Why am I by myself?" And then that might trigger some kind of internal work. I don't know, but it's very hard to shift someone to do the right thing when all they know is the thing that's helping them to move forward, even if it's in a negative and dysfunctional manner.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And then, to touch on the fact that, I understand that you wrote a book called Scapegoat, No More Ways to Understand Scapegoating and How to Stop It.
Mhm.
I guess my question is, what prompted you to write the book?
Well, it's interesting. I had just lost a job due to scapegoating. I had two racist, I'm just going to say it, white women that came from a part of Los Angeles that's Republican, and I'm talking like conservative Republican, where we're considered three-fifths of a human being. I mean, that's where they came from,
Okay.
and so I was, ultimately lost my job. And during that time, the Holy Spirit said to me, "Write a book." And I asked him on what. He said scapegoating. And I knew intuitively what it was, but I said, let me look it up to see in the dictionary. And then when I read it, it just resonated with me. And I said, that's what he wants me to write. And literally went to the library every day because I didn't have a computer at the time. And for 7 weeks, I wrote 1,000 words each day. And the next thing I knew, my manuscript was written, but it wouldn't be until 8 years that I published it because there were a lot of things that the Lord wanted me to see in those 8 years that would kind of be the period behind the statements that I was making, like
I
things in
see.
the world that had to transact in order for that to happen. And after that, the Lord said, it's time to publish. And so I uploaded my manuscript to an independent publisher, and voila, here's my book.
I'm happy
So
for you.
Yeah, thank you. So just talking with different people. In fact, I was in Starbucks before I left you, and I was telling someone I have to hurry up because I'm on a podcast and I'm really excited about it. And someone heard me and they said, "Oh, what are you going to be talking about?" And I told them about my book. They literally legit looked it up and they're like, "Oh my God, that's me." So I've been getting those kinds of responses. Like people are like, "I didn't think that scapegoating was a thing until I realized like that was me." So I'm excited to see how this takes off. And so I'm doing a lot of marketing for my book, kind of difficult, but I'm hoping that it will just catch fire. So, because I think it's a way for people to unpack and just get themselves to a healthier place. Some people are in pain and don't realize they are because of the sharp words that were thrust upon them, things that have physically happened to them. There's even scapegoating and sexual abuse, blaming sexual abuse victims that if you didn't wear that dress, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have been attracted to you. So just even unpacking that for people that have gone through those pieces of abuse. So, that's where I am and I'm excited for where this will take, where my book will go.
I'm happy for you and excited. I think it is a book that's required. The reason why I say this is even sitting here talking to you, I I am aware, but at the same time not aware of scapegoating. And what I mean by that is
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever had anybody really use me as a scapegoat. I
Mm-hmm.
don't believe maybe I've ever used somebody as a reason why I couldn't do something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I may have one more time. I don't like I'm thinking and I'm looking at my history and just I'm like, I've never really blamed anybody for not getting to where I wanted to go. I think when you
Okay.
said that your parents are, it's almost like your parents teach you something. It depends on how you were raised to a certain extent in respects to your characteristics. I was always taught that nobody owes you anything. So
Absolutely.
if nobody owes me anything, I can't blame them because they don't owe me anything. That's what like you have to work
Yeah,
for what you want.
absolutely. Absolutely. But then there's the piece, there are times when I won't say where scapegoating is justified because I don't think it's ever justified, but here it is. There are times when blame is justified. Like, in the United States, we're dealing with structural racism. I mean, look
Okay.
at George Floyd. What happened with George Floyd, the knee on his neck?
Hmm.
That was just the clarion call of what had been happening since 1619
Yes.
when we were brought to the United States as slaves. 20 people hit Jamestown and slavery, the institution of slavery ensued. And so we can't pretend that the black on black crime isn't a part of white supremacy, that black people turn on each other because the way we were divided as the house Negro and the field
Fair
Negro,
enough.
right? If you read Willie Lynch letter, which I talk very poignantly and very directly in my book. So there are ways that, we can shoulder some of that blame onto people when structurally, institutionally, and individually, which my mentor calls the tripartite beast of racism, has infested the ways in which Black people move around the globe. It's Africans of the diaspora that have fared the worst when it comes to education, healthcare, all of the disparities because of the fact that white supremacy is real, white violence is real. So there are times that blame, rightly so, has to be shifted.
No, I agree with you on that because then that's so much to talk about. There's so much, there's so much to talk about. And I appreciate this conversation. And before I forget, like I know you wrote the book itself. If anybody want to, get a copy of the book or even, reach out to you to discover more or even learn more about what you are doing, what's the best platform to reach you out on?
So they can go to Amazon for the print copy. I'm also on Kindle, Amazon Kindle. So if you want electronic version, if you have a Kindle device, also Barnes and Noble / Nook has an ebook, Scribed, anywhere ebooks are sold. If you want to hit me up and tell me about my book, whether you like it or hate it, it's stop dash scapegoat no more .godaddy.sites, and you can reach me there. Um, let's see, maybe I'll even give you my email address, which is actress with power, ACTRESS with power @gmail.com. So yeah, hit me up or hit up the books and let's talk.
We're gonna have your website details in the video, and the show notes will have the other details as well.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm just
But
I'm go ahead.
Yeah, but the signs of being a family scapegoat, if you're in a familial structure, it's you're a scapegoat, like if you're constantly feeling ignored, believing that you're not praised often while your siblings are overpraised, you're portrayed in a negative light to others, you're isolated from others, the flaws of others are projected onto you, you're the family punching bag, and you know the truth about yourself, but you're ignored. There's constant gaslighting and dog whistling, hidden codes to make you feel poorly about yourself. But then in the public purview, you're treated like you're a rock star because people don't want other people to see that you're low key being abused. So those are signs if you're a family scapegoat. And so that's something that you'd want to look at.
When you say dog whistling, what's dog whistling? I've never heard of that.
Coded messages, like things that are hidden messages. An example would be, uh, wow, I just saw your test. You made an A on it. No, you made a B on it. I wonder what would happen if you made an A. So it's a backhanded compliment, like, oh yeah, I acknowledge that you made it, but like, in other words, you're still falling. You get it, right? Or I actually got a text from someone, I'll leave nameless, and they said, "Oh, you're the 14th person that I sent something to. I'd sent this text to someone else about a concert that's happening," and as if to say I was an afterthought without quite saying it. And I went to my friend and I said, "Is this dog whistling? Is a little bit of gaslighting?" They're like, "Yeah, that's a little bit of like low key abuse." Like, in other words, you were afterthought when I sent the text, because 14 other people or 13 other people got this text before.
I have no time for that. Not the
No,
person. I don't have
I
time for
didn't.
that. I have no time for that. Oh my God. This is the reason why I'm saying this is very profound for me. I personally don't have people scapegoating me. I think maybe some people have experienced that. I think, listening to this, it will help them. And then I like the fact that you give examples of how someone can know that they're being abused through scapegoating as well. And then the breakdown you did at the beginning was beautiful. I sat there going, okay. And you mentioned something that's really significant for me, is that a lot of people that do get used as scapegoats, some of them lack self-esteem or understanding of who they are, or like, and they take it, and it can really do very mental damage to them, because some of them will believe that, or some of them don't know how to cope with the feelings that come from being used as a punching bag to a certain extent.
Right, absolutely. And those are the ones that are typically preyed upon. When you think about the quiet, they said, don't sleep among quiet girls, because those are the ones that'll whip your tail if you mess with them. But a lot of times they get to the point that they can no longer take it because they're constantly being picked on, right? And then they just erupt and unhinge. But typically it's people that mind their own business, that ain't messing with nobody, doing what they need to do. And someone takes it as a sign of weakness. And they think that's the person that I'm going to unleash all of my frustrations. But they don't understand that every scapegoat has an inner fight, that they'll fall down, but they're going to get back up again. They're not going to put up with it, even if it takes them 30 years to do it. But yeah, typically it's that. Or as I said earlier, someone that's strong, the popular person, pretty, according to society standards, because I think everybody's beautiful. Someone that is a student, someone that is quite successful in whatever they do. And somehow that triggers someone who has done nothing with their lives. So they're like, I'm going to try to trip them up. And I'm going to, bring in other people to triangulate and mob them through, being, unrighteously in undignified, whether that be, bullying or excluding them from social sets, and, or whatever it takes to make them feel less than what we know they really are. So
would that be almost the
it's a
same
little
as
bit.
some people do on social media when they basically, what's the word I'm looking for? When people like make comments on people's, to make them feel bad or feel like it's a lie, or make them bring them, because you said something that triggers people, right? So
Right.
there's a word for it. I just forgot the word.
Well,
It's like,
gaslighting is dismissing,
mhm.
the work of, just kind of minimizing what people are doing. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you just kind of not acknowledge, like not acknowledging is just as abusive as acknowledging with something that's not courteous. You know what I
Fair
mean?
enough.
Like if you, let's say, won an Oscar for a movie and we were best friends, so to speak, and I never acknowledged that you won the Oscar. And I'm like, oh, what do you want to eat? And throughout the whole conversation, I never mentioned your Oscar. And you're somebody that you feel that I'm her best friend. I can't, maybe she's take me out to lunch so we can talk about the fact that I won this award and I say nothing. That's gaslighting. Or if, I bring it up, I'm like, oh yeah, you won an Oscar, but did I tell you my other friend, she won a Tony on Broadway? As if to say, yeah, you won that, but then I have a friend that did that. So what you did wasn't that, good. So yeah.
You know what? I may have to be looking at my behavior going forward now. I may have to. I don't think I don't gaslight people. I just think sometimes you just have to be more self-aware of how you come across to people. I think that's what
Right.
I'm really saying. You have
Right.
to be self-aware because you never want to intentionally try to hurt somebody. But you're
Right.
right. Like a lot of people have their own internal
Right.
issues that they're trying to deal with. And
Right.
I've always wanted to treat people the same way I want to be treated. But it's still nice to be more self-aware of how you come across.
Right. And that's what this book is about, not just for the person that's a scapegoat, for the person that's potentially a scapegoater. I mean, because I remember a couple of people read it and they're like, let me just make sure that I'm not the person
Yeah,
hurting people. That's what
that's
that's what this is about. And so when you
yeah,
talk about self-awareness, maybe this is the way that you could do it through my book.
yeah. And even talking to you because I just spent the past 20 minutes being self-aware of the fact that am I doing that? And if not, okay, I'm not doing that. All right, what? Take back and maybe sit down and like get your book as well, but also just look at how you react and how people perceive you, and are you doing something that may come across, but you're not self-aware of it.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes things just, activate your mind. You're like, wait a minute, ding, ding, ding. That might be me. And there's one chapter when in my book that says when people scapegoat objects and things, and I go specifically about a friend that I have who, when we would go out to eat, she found everything wrong with the restaurant because she just was so miserable. The silverware, I think there's a spot on it. Oh, the waitress, she has an attitude with me. Oh my God, it just came back from the bathroom. They should have used Lysol. All the food, it's okay. All of that. So you can even, scapegoat objects and things. And, it's just
There are people like
scapegoaters
that.
do
No,
not
it's true. There's people like that.
right.
Like what you said, there's really people like that. There's miserable people like that. And you don't, and they may not be doing specifically to somebody, but you're right to things. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. And
All right.
so we're not, I just had to distance myself from her because she was that negative. I was like, no, I can't.
I can't either. Before I let you go, Gina, I appreciate this conversation. I think a lot of people should like, if for anybody's watching or listening, like honestly, you may not be self-aware. If you are not self-aware, this is a great book to start off with and, start unpacking some of maybe generational trauma that you have. And you may need to seek somebody further to help to basically undo those trauma. But regardless, what I was trying to say is really, Jen, before I let you go, anything you want to add or say to us?
Get the help that you need. If you are a scapegoat, get the help that you need. You know, I don't push religion, but I think for me as a Christian, that's what's really helped me because I think, and I said this in another podcast, that unforgiveness is like you drinking the poison and expecting the other person to die. You have to forgive and understand that it's not personal, it's spiritual. The second thing is if you need to jump into therapy, nothing's wrong with that. Have someone you can talk to. Because a lot of times with me, I'm like, is it just me? Am I being paranoid or this just happened? Is this person being a jerk? And a
I've
lot
done
of
that.
times it's like, yeah, my therapist is like, yeah, I think the person's being a jerk, right? And they can give clinical support around what that looks like with the language that they've been, taught as they move through helping others. So that always find someone that you can talk to. Sometimes I've even talked to strangers on a bus, you know what I mean, that have nothing, integrated into your life with theirs that would make them be biased. They're just saying it as an objective person. Sometimes strangers can give the best advice, but acknowledge, self-reflect, whatever it takes so that you can get healthy, because you don't want to go through life being traumatized and then re-triggering and becoming the person that you want to be delivered from other people. So yeah.
I love that. Thank you very much for being part of this platform. It was a great conversation. I learned a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I had a blast.
We're glad to have you join us. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, share with anyone that needs to be empowered and inspired, and don't forget to join us next week for the next episode of Health Your Own Way podcast. Have a good day, you guys.